It's something crazy like that. And I am nose to nose with this monkey, just screaming in his face, trying to get him to let go. And I'm like, ah! And he's just biting down, going, "Arr!"
Hello and welcome everybody to the Jet Life Podcast. Today we are interviewing Luke Andrews. He is a real estate agent, a leader and investor, a best-selling author, speaker, and a sales and negotiation coach, helping people overcome their fear of confrontation so that they can communicate more effectively. Luke, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Tom, I am so pumped to be here, man. This is awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, because this is kind of like a series of interviews I'm doing with social media influencers, network people that I come in contact with that, maybe have been thinking about buying a private jet, but they're not quite there yet. It's an opportunity for us to talk about questions that you might have about buying a private jet, how it's going to impact your business, just to kind of pull back the curtain, because I know a lot of people are interested in private aviation, but they don't always have an opportunity to speak with a broker directly or speak with someone who knows the industry directly. And so I'm hoping to answer your questions and in turn answer some of our audiences. So again, thanks for being open to this interview.
No, it's fantastic. Can't wait to dive into it.
Well, let's dive into it. I would love to hear of any stories that you might have regarding your experience with commercial aviation right now.
So my girlfriend, now wife, girlfriend at the time, her dad was working for an American company in Colombia, and her parents were living down there. And so for 3 straight years, I spent 2 weeks every Christmas and 2 weeks every summer in Cartagena. And then just kind of moved around to, Medellin, Barranquilla, Santa Marta, some places like that. But it was the first or the second time that I had gone. So my wife was actually able to fly private. The company she was with flew a private jet a couple of times a week back and forth from Birmingham down to Colombia. And we went to college about 3 hours north of Birmingham. And so as long as there was room on the jet, she could fly down there for free and basically just go to the beach for the weekend. I could not fly on the jet because we weren't married at the time. So I flew commercial every time I went. And it was first or second time I went, I'm coming back from Cartagena into Miami, waiting in the customs line. I've got a very tight connection, and this line is long. I mean, as you can imagine, the customs lines are no joke. And so I'm waiting, I'm staring at my watch, and this guy in a suit comes and stands next to me, and he's like, it's a long line, isn't it? And I said, yeah, man, it is. I got a tight connection. And he said, well, you don't need to wait in that line. Why don't you come with me? And I kind of glanced at him. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I can wait. And then his buddy, partner, whatever, comes and stands on the other side of me, opens up his jacket and flashes a badge. And he's like, no, really, come with us. And I was like, oh, shoot, here we go. And so they bring me back into this back room. And the whole time I'm just deathly terrified. I mean, I hadn't flown a whole lot up to that point. Definitely, this was my first international flights, and I'm by myself. I'm young. And while I was down in Colombia, I got bit by a monkey. My own stupid fault. Like, I see these monkeys, and like, I've wanted to own a monkey since I was 4 years old. And so it was like, I see a monkey, it looks nice, I'm gonna put my finger out there. Dumbest thing I've ever done, right? Like, I'm looking at this monkey, and he's like staring at my finger, and he's like, oh, it's cute. And this thing bites down on my finger. And it's this little tiny capuchin, but they are strong as can be. And I'm yanking my finger. Can't
Is
get
that
it
like
over.
the plot line to Outbreak or something? Like,
yeah, it's something crazy like that. And I am nose to nose with this monkey, just screaming in his face, trying to get him to let go. And I'm like, ah! And he's just biting down, going, Arr! No joke. I had to poke this monkey in the eye to get him to let go. So I get bit by a monkey, and they got me all stitched up, gave me some shots, whatever it is that they do.
You're supposed to report that stuff when you're traveling, right? You got to fill it out. Did you get bit by a monkey?
Yeah, well, yeah, they didn't ask that question specifically. I think they're smarter than that. But, so I'm filling out the customs form on the flight, and it's like, hey, have you been to any farms, contact with animals? And I'm like, nope, no time for that. So I'm waiting in line, and I'm convinced that they've gotten some kind of doctor records, and they're like, you lied on this form. I think I'm going to prison for the rest of my life. Well, they essentially they bring me back into the back room, and I'm like, and I realize that they're asking me all kinds of questions like, "What were you doing in Colombia?" And they think that it's drug related.
Oh my
So I ended up
gosh.
missing my flight. Had to spend a night in Miami, which I mean, I guess as a 18, 19-year-old, there are probably worse things to have happen. Get a free hotel room in Miami for the night, but um, it was just one of those nightmares of flying commercial.
I appreciate you checking out this video. Before I continue, I want you to go to theultimatejetguide.com, where I've put together a full guide for jet buyers like yourself.
And I know that's one of the realities of commercial aviation. There's so many things out of your control, and not only out of your control, but also out of the control that are people of the people that are impacting your experience. The gate agent, the ticketing agent, the security, like they can only do so much. And so there's not only is it out of your control, but it's like 2, 3, 4 levels beyond your control that it's a huge nightmare. But I appreciate you sharing that story. Not everybody gets bit by a monkey and then gets pulled out of line in commercial, but sometimes it's just death by 1,000 paper cuts as well. So that's certainly one of the benefits we have flying private. So let me ask you, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Luke. What do you do, and why do you want to be flying private someday? Where would that kind of impact what you're doing on a day-to-day from a business perspective?
Sure. So as you mentioned in the intro, I've got a couple of real estate businesses. So I do help people buy and sell, but my primary real estate space, I've got a team of agents that recruiting, leading, mentoring, training, trying to help get them to be able to produce more. And by working with them directly, we've been able to do some A/B testing, some trial and error, and figure out some things that really work for them that kind of transcend a situation. And what I decided to do a couple of years ago was basically take that and turn those into courses to be able to go out and essentially scale impact, be able to help more people around. And that has led into some keynote speaking as well. And it was one of those that I did it once and it scared the hell out of me. But I absolutely loved it. It was like I felt alive up there, and I knew that I needed to do that more in my life. And so the kind of traveling around with speaking and training, being able to fly private would make things significantly better, because a lot of times you're on these really tight schedules to try and get in and get out same day, or I need to wrap this keynote and be to the airport at X time, and like I've got everything planned to the minute, only to get to the airport to realize they didn't alert me that my flight is 3 hours delayed. And
Yeah.
I could have spent more time with the group that I was with, or I could have stopped and gone to the bathroom or gotten some food or something like that. But it would be phenomenal. And then just have some additional space while you're actually up in the air to be able to do some work and some planning. So I think from a scheduling perspective and a workspace perspective, it just sounds amazing. And not to mention, jets are just freaking cool, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a flex. It's a great flex, man.
It's just cool. And so it's that just adds on top of everything else.
No, and I really appreciate, being in control of your own schedule, right? So you're not on somebody else's schedule. You're in control of your own schedule, from when you leave, all the way to, when you're going to arrive. That's really important, especially for business owners like yourself, that your time is valuable, that if you're wasting time because you're not in, you're trying to kill time before your flight, or you're rushing and you're missing out on meetings because you're rushing to a flight, being in control of your own schedule is huge. Let me ask you this. How long has private aviation been on your radar? Seriously on your radar?
I mean, it's something I started, watching, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 years ago. Just more of just like hey, that would be awesome bucket list.
Sure.
Kind of thing, saw it on like MTV Cribs or something.
Yeah.
But it's been one of those that is like, how can I make this work? I read a book by Jesse Itzler a couple of years ago that really just, you probably are familiar with his story, that he was just like, me and a friend got to ride on a private jet at one point. And so we were like, how do we do this more often? So they started their private jet leasing company. And I think it was NetJets or one of them that they ultimately ended up selling to Warren Buffett and Berkshire
Wow.
Hathaway. But that kind of got me into it as well. It was like, how just do regular people, and I'd say quote regular people, not celebrities or
Hmm.
multi-millionaires. How do you make this work? How do you fit it into your life? And
Yeah.
more importantly,
No.
into your budget.
Tell me some of the things that you're thinking about or questions that you might have when it comes to buying or even just riding in a private jet.
Sure. And so some of it too, it's like where do we find that break even point? And I know
Hmm.
part of it is you have to have a strong handle on what the value is of your own personal time. Because I think if you just straight do dollars and cents, it's never going to make fiscal sense to do it
Hmm.
that way. But when you start factoring in what is the cost of my time, and my sanity, frankly, where does that roll in? But I guess I'm trying to look. Where are most of your clients looking to say, okay, this is kind of my break even point, and whether it be a number of people, because I have heard like, hey, if I was going to fly several family members down, take a 6 hour trip, and I was going to pay for them all to be in first class, it might actually make sense or be just as feasible to take a private jet
Yeah.
instead. So
Yeah,
how do you
sure.
help clients determine what does that break even point look like?
Yeah, well, obviously, like you said, knowing the value of your time is extremely important, but also knowing the value of your time and the activity that you're going to do. So if you're going to go, close a multi-million dollar deal that's going to net you, a couple hundred grand, well, then spending 20, 30, 40 grand to travel there and back, I mean, you can make sense of that,
Sure.
pretty quickly based on the deal that you're trying to do. So if you're playing at that high level, I mean, you can kind of look at it from a deal perspective. But usually, what I'll tell people, the first place you want to get started is going to be your chartering. So for a single trip, right? And your single trip is going to be anywhere from plan on spending, let's say, 10,000 to, I mean, you could spend 100 grand on a round trip. We spent, my family and I, to give you an example, it's my wife, myself, and we have 5 children,
Oh wow.
13 and younger. Yeah. So we were planning a family trip last year to go to Gatlinburg. And so we flew from Sarasota, Florida to Gatlinburg. And that was about a $15,000 round trip. And we did it primarily for the experience. Not that we could afford that like on a regular basis or anything, but we wanted to experience that time together. And at the same time that we did that trip, my in-laws were coming with us. They decided to fly commercial. So we were able to wake up, get to the airport whenever we wanted, drive the car to the plane, get it loaded up, make sure we use the bathroom, head up there. It's like an hour and 45-minute flight. My kid got to sit in the cockpit, so he got to fly, which is pretty cool. We got to relax. We got there before lunchtime. Our rental car was waiting for us. We just took the luggage from the plane to the rental car. We went, we grabbed lunch. We had a whole extra day at the cabin, not to mention the fact that the airport we flew into was about 20 minutes away from the cabin. So we got a whole extra day of vacation. My wife's family had to leave their house before us because they had an hour plus drive to the airport. They had to get there 3 hours early, to make sure that everything was in order, get through security. They had to sit there, wait. They had to fly all the way out to Tennessee. Their airport was over an hour away. They had to pick up the rental car. Yep, they had to go pick up their bags, wait for that. They had to go to the rental car, wait for that. Then they had to drive over an hour away. They didn't get home to the cabin until about midnight. So they lost an entire day of vacation. And then you fast forward to the end of the vacation. Again, we got to leave whenever we wanted to enjoy breakfast. We had a 20-minute drive to the airport, got in the plane. We flew. We were able to take my wife's sister and her baby with us because they were feeling a little under the weather, and we just didn't want to put them through the nightmare of commercial flying. So they came with us. That was a lot of fun. I got to fly in the cockpit on that one, so that was cool. And we got home before dinner. Like we were literally in our house before dinner, and we could relax and decompress and roll into regular life, which when you're coming in from vacation, like you have to decompress for like a week sometimes because of
Yeah.
how the travel is. It costs us $15,000 to charter. We got 2 extra days of vacation and enjoyed that time together. So everybody kind of has to make, the valuation of their time on their own. But to me, that just made a lot of sense for us to have that experience of chartering an aircraft. And that's kind of where I tell people to start. Charter 1 or 2 flights, see what you think about private aviation. Stay chartering for about 50 hours a year. Once you're at 50 to 100 hours a year, maybe you look into fractional ownership or some kind of a jet card. Once you get to 100 hours a year, maybe you're thinking about owning 150, 200 hours a year. It's going to make more sense for you to own the aircraft. And so that's kind of how I kind of lay it out to people.
Well, and I guess I'd probably look at it. So you're saying that the cost, the Gatlinburg to Sarasota round trip, was about $15K to charter the jet. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I mean, really, and I'd venture to say that 15K is actually, more like 12.5, because if you didn't charter, you're going to have to turn around. You're going to have to buy plane tickets, because your in-laws had to buy plane tickets on commercial, right?
Yep.
And so you talk about 5, 7 people that you have to buy plane tickets for, and then that's not even factoring in first class. That's probably coach. If you bought them all first class tickets, you're probably looking, the actual true cost to you was under 10K at that point to have those extra days.
Well, that's just it, right? And you look at it, if you have 7 adults that can, split costs. I mean, we're talking $2,000, a pop for you and your family to fly, if they can all kind of pay for themselves. So, it's interesting. The other thing I tell people, like, when you're looking to charter, the only options you have available are not just the Gulfstream heavy jets that are, tens of thousands of dollars to charter per hour. But you can also charter smaller jets or even turboprops that can fit 6, 7, 8 people in the back. And if you're only going an hour, you can save yourself. It could be under $10,000 if you're going. For example, I had someone flying from St. Petersburg, Florida, down to Key West. That was about an hour trip. That was, I think, round trip, maybe $5,000 for them.
Right.
So that could be an option. Instead of having to drive almost 6 hours to Key West, now you have an opportunity to fly. Again, you're gaining a whole day or two of vacation by being able to fly private. So, the other option is also looking at, you could fly pistons or turboprops or multi-engine aircraft that's a little bit cheaper and still get the private aviation experience. And one of the interesting things that we found, you can probably relate to it in terms of real estate, is, individuals that might have a tax bill coming due and they're using the purchase of the asset for depreciation purposes, because you can do accelerated depreciation at 80% of the value of the aircraft. So if you're going to do that, then you've got that tax play, and then you can turn it over to a charter company that can rent out the jet. So while you're not using it, it's still flying and generating income. So that's become more and more popular on my end, from people looking to buy a jet, but wanting to. Now, I'm not saying it's going to turn like a huge profit or anything, but it can offset the costs for what you're trying to do with what your needs are.
So it's almost like you buy a vacation home and then you Airbnb it when you're not using it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's actually what my most recent guide has been kind of mapping that out for people, because there's still a lot of pitfalls, and when it comes to trying to make that play work, it's not as straightforward, or there's not as much information out there as there is in real estate, which is one of the things I'm trying to do with the podcast. But it's really important when I'm working with people that they have someone that they know, like, and trust. It's kind of similar in real estate, to help guide them through the process, because it can become very overwhelming very quickly.
So do you find that you have clients that are, it's almost like they're using the jet as an investment, similar to a vacation home, that they can rent it out to offset 90 to potentially 100% of the cost, and not use it as a money maker, but it can at least offset the cost enough to where they can just use it and essentially have it usable at no cost, no additional out of pocket to them.
For sure. And so I, normally will tell people, if you're chartering less, if you're flying less than 50 hours, you should go to a charter company and do it. You don't have all the overhead. Well, if you have the stomach for it and you're only doing 50 to 100 hours a year, you can partner with that charter company and, buy a plane. So you're going to have a $2 to $6 million, capital outlay to find a jet that's, a good, obviously with a vacation home, it's not like you're going to buy one, in the middle of nowhere and then like, yeah, I'm going to cash flow. You got to get the right, asset itself. So, looking $2 to $6 million for that asset, and then partner with the right charter company with the right model and in the right market with the right expertise and the right maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, those charter companies can help you offset your maintenance costs and your fixed costs that you're using the airplane for those limited amount of hours that you are.
Interesting question that I do have is, now, do you introduce people? So let's just say that somebody wanted to come in and invest that way, buy this jet, and then kind of offset the costs and release it out. Do you have people that you hook them up with for financing pieces, or is this if you have to ask about financing, you can't afford the jet, you just need to be able to write that check on the front side, the $2 to $6 million that you're talking about?
It's funny. What you just said is what I've heard from brokers on kind of a consistent basis, and I just never liked it. Sometimes you find brokers that are just very dismissive, like, oh, if you have to ask that question, then you can't afford it, you shouldn't be in here. And unfortunately, that's more
because I've had that question asked to me before, and so that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, and I just don't find that to be helpful. Like if I say that to someone, or someone says that to me, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just starting, like, or maybe like you don't know, and you're like you're throwing some shade at me, and I try to, So to answer your question though, it's a multifaceted process. There are reasons to finance the purchase of a jet, not because you can't afford it. Right. I mean, look at the loans, the interest rates that we had in years past. I mean, it would be silly for someone to tie up cash on an acquisition of a jet for $2 million. Why would you tie up $2 million in a depreciating asset when you can tie up the bank's money at 0 to 1 to 2 to 3% interest, take that cash, put it in a vehicle that and make 8, 9, 10, 12, 20% on your investment. So,
and that's always been my reply to those people, because I've had people say that to me, where they're like, I've talked to them about potential investments, and they're like, well, if you have to ask about financing, you can't afford it. It's like, well, what if I can finance this at 5 and I have an investment that I can turn around and put it into at 10? Doesn't matter how much money I have, dollars make sense, right? So
yeah, for sure. And so it's a multifaceted process, which is why I love working with people in that position, like as their guide. I'm kind of the master of all the chaos, because we got to find the right operator. We got to find a banker that's going to loan on a specific, category of jet that's going to be used for charter, because not all banks will loan on a 135 or a charter plane. If you're going to put it in there, a bank will tell you no, and so we got to find the right lender. We got to find the right operator. We're also going to play in the insurance world, making sure that that's all squared away. So there's a lot of things that kind of happen together in concert at the same time that I would never expect, an end user, a multimillionaire to, be spending all his time and organizing all that. Like, I just want to be at his or her service, kind of similar to, I imagine, how you guys treat real estate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell people where they can find out, what you're up to, especially, especially people that are listening that are into sales and real estate. I really think that Luke's services can be of assistance. So where can people find out more information?
Sure. So my website, lukeandrews.us, or you can always shoot me an email, luke@lukeandrews.us. I do answer all my own emails. I don't have a VA doing that. So if anybody has questions about investing, real estate, sales and negotiation, whatever, or come find me on LinkedIn. Luke Andrews on there, or I think it's linkedin.com/sales and negotiation coach. They can check that out. So
very cool. Well, Luke, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. We greatly appreciate it.